Welcome to everyone joining. We're going to start in a few minutes. Thank you for being here and joining us today. Silvana, I think we can get started. Okay. Yep. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for joining today to this webinar on using sustainable public procurement to drive demand for near zero and resilient built environment with a focus on applied best practices and examples. My name is Gina Torregrosa. I'm a program officer at UNEP, leading the organization's work on sustainable public procurement. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you today, moderating this webinar with a fantastic lineup of speakers that we have coordinated in collaboration with our colleagues from C40 Cities and the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. And this is taking part as a part of the activities under the Buildings Breakthrough Priority Action 2 on demand creation. So let's just jump right into it. And let me begin by doing this forceful pitch, reinforcing a fundamental point of why public procurement matters. We see public procurement not just as an administrative process, but actually as a powerful strategic tool that directly impacts the daily lives of people. Procurement underpins how governments deliver essential services, from healthcare and education to transport, energy, and waste management. And in many of these sectors, public authorities are the principal buyers, which means that they have the leverage to set the tone and the direction of the market itself. And it operates at a critical intersection, the nexus between government and business. Through procurement, governments define the rules of engagement, who participates, under what conditions, and with what expectations. And this means that procurement decisions can establish standards for inclusiveness, stimulate circular economy innovation by creating market signals, and promote responsible business practice. So in other words, procurement is not just about purchasing, it's about influencing supply and value chains. And the scale is really staggering. Public procurement accounts to 13 to 20% of GDP in many countries. And globally, we're talking about nearly $10 trillion of annual spending. And in this regard, it is also a tool for responsible public finance, especially in times of constrained budgets. Procurement can ensure that every dollar spent delivers maximum social, economic, and environmental returns. And perhaps most importantly, when procurement is aligned with environmental and social commitment and national priorities, it builds public trust. It shows that governments are walking the talk and that their purchasing power reflects their values and development priorities. And if we move into the next slide, we can see that this is particularly relevant in the construction sector. We know that a significant share of public spending is directed to buildings and infrastructure. And at the same time, we know that this is a sector with high environmental, social, and economic impacts. You can see it in the slide: 37% of global GHG emissions, 50% of the total global material footprint, 40% of solid waste in developed countries, with a trajectory of growth that indicates that 50% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 have not been built yet. And hence, GHG emissions are expected to double by 2060. Also accounting for 11 to 13% of global GDP and 7% of jobs. So the sector represents also some of the greatest socioeconomic impacts and opportunities. And with this short preamble, if we move into the next slide, today, as I mentioned, we have a great lineup of speakers introducing the work being led by C40 Cities and by UNEP's 10YP Secretariat and its One Planet Network on this domain, and presenting concrete examples of how sustainable and circular public procurement in the sector is actually being implemented. We have interventions from the city of Oslo and San Francisco, and examples from the Netherlands and Wales, and closing remarks by Finland. If we move into the next slide, we hope that the examples and concepts introduced are valuable, and the invitation is please to actively engage, include your questions on the Q&A section as the presenter speaks, and we'll have a section responding to all your questions towards the end of the webinar, so please make sure to include them in there. So without further ado, I think we can introduce our first speaker. We have, if we move into the next slide, Andrew Armstrong, the Senior Manager in the Buildings and Clean Construction team at C40 Cities, presenting C40's accelerators for clean construction and net zero carbon buildings. Andrew, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gina. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce C40 Cities and do a little bit more of the context setting. Well, we are going to hear a lot of great case studies, as Gina's just pointed out further down the line. But first, I'm going to speak a little bit about how city networks can, create that change and the power of cities speaking with one voice, through aggregating their demand. Can signal to markets that net zero and resilient buildings are the new normal. I'll quickly touch on how cities can advocate for that, but also how they can deliver on it as well, and primarily leading through green public procurement, which is the main topic of today's discussion, ultimately leading to that market transformation that we need to see by 2050, as Gina already alluded to. Quickly, a quick intro. C40 is a network of mayors, nearly 100 mayors of world-leading cities around the globe, collaborating with each other to deliver on that urgent action that's needed to confront the climate crisis. Our cities and their staffers are committed to a science-based and people-focused approach to that transition to build healthy, equitable, and resilient communities. So popping to the next slide, please. So if that's who we are, a little bit of what we do. We do cover all sectors, but my focus and the topic of today's discussion is on energy and buildings. Focusing on building policies, mandatory performance standards. We look to support cities decarbonizing their energy supplies, switching obviously away from fossil fuels towards clean energy and clean heat. But also, crucially, we look at embodied emissions as well, to address those hidden emissions of the built environment. And the term we use for that is clean construction, which we'll hear that a little bit later on as well. As we can see, buildings and industry account for the vast majority of emissions in C40 cities, and that energy use in those buildings contributes to the to air pollution issues as well. So how do we support cities? It's a peer sharing network. We focus on knowledge exchange and peer-to-peer learning. We also deliver direct technical assistance as well. Crucially today, I'll be talking mostly about how we platform mayors and convene cities together to speak with one voice, to amplify that voice. And one of our key tools for doing that is our accelerators. So these are key tools for mayors to signal their climate ambition. They're public, so we get cities publicly commit to them. I think that's the crucial element. Demonstrating that direction of travel with long-term commitment. So yeah, to the next slide, please. And the first example I'm going to talk about today is the Clean Construction Accelerator. And as I mentioned, that's sort of focusing on embodied emissions in the built environment. The way we structure the accelerator is sort of through a prioritization sort of framework, an action hierarchy, if you will, focusing first and foremost on the better use of existing assets, to maintain the buildings that currently are standing, to utilize them better, to expand them, to repurpose them, to avoid their demolition ultimately, and to make sure that we optimize them as much as possible. We look to use materials more sensibly, so use recycled materials, use less materials, use bio-based materials as that second kind of level. The third level is when we do design buildings, we design them better, flexibly, so that they can be deconstructed and contribute to that circular economy, and crucially that they're really resilient, so that they are not they don't cause pain, suffering for those who occupy them, but they also do not get damaged easily in a changing climate, and protect the residents and occupants within them. And also then the fourth step is looking at low emission construction sites as well. So what are some of the actions? So there's 8 commitments in the accelerator. I won't go through them all. The key ones to just touch on here with you today is the circular procurement requirement for municipalities who sign up to the accelerator. Demanding low carbon materials and incorporating all of those circular principles in the buildings they own and occupy. Another key one is on developing a joint roadmap with stakeholders. So this is like the key part of bringing together and convening stakeholders, to set milestones and come up with shared goals. And then also the other piece to mention is on advocacy to markets and to other levels of government, to come along that journey with cities who are leading the way. And I think the point to just finish on this slide is that to transform the built environment from highly consumption-based, highly polluting to one that is low carbon in every sense will take collective action, and no single actor can force that change on their own. No single policy can deliver that. But bringing together all of the stakeholders using these different levers and mechanisms is key to kind of shifting the mindset of building owners, of building developers, of financiers, and the green public procurement element is that lighthouse leadership aspect, forging that path. So popping on to the next slides. The other accelerator, other C40 accelerator, I'm just going to describe quickly, is our Net Zero Carbon Buildings Accelerator. So if we've talked about the embodied emissions, obviously, the other huge chunk of the built environment emissions are the operational emissions. And together, they are a whole life carbon approach. And this is, something that we are actively, looking for actors in the field to consider, side by side as a twin approach, across all scope of emissions in the built environment. And so the operational emissions accelerator just looks at policies to push new building codes to be net zero carbon. Also, that all existing buildings adhere to performance standards by 2050. And then the third element on municipal buildings is this really accelerated timeframe for municipal buildings to decarbonize by 2030, which this accelerated timeframe, it demonstrates city leadership. As I said, it kind of forges a path. It disrupts standard practices, and spreads those innovative practices more widely. I think I'm coming close to the end of my time, so I'll skip to the next slide and we'll see here that we have not just those two accelerators I've described, but all the accelerators on screen, which cover all sectors of mitigation, of adaptation, and covering all scopes in boundary within cities and also consumption emissions. So quickly in summary, they are rooted in science-based targets. They're public declarations. They are robustly sort of monitored by us, and collectively aim to halve emissions by 2030, whilst focusing on that resilience aspect simultaneously as well. I'll stop there and hand back to you, Gina. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for presenting the interesting work that you're doing. I believe that now we can jump into our next set of presentations focused on best practices at local level. As a first speaker, if we move into the next slide, we have Philip Mortensen, who is a senior advisor with the City of Oslo and is going to present public procurement, reducing embodied carbon for construction at the city. Thank you, Philip. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So next slide, please. I'll just start off with saying a few words about our context, our policy goals. I'll talk a bit about our efforts on electrification of the construction process, and then I'll talk a bit about how we work with the requirements for low carbon materials. So please, next. So these are the goals in the climate strategy, consolidated both by the city government and the city council. We have a kind of parliamentary governance structure in Oslo. And for those of you who don't know us, Oslo is a city of roughly 700,000 people. So the key goal and the sort of the high priority policy ambition is for the city to become virtually zero emission, in scope 1 with all direct emissions by 2030. So this was actually a goal, an ambition that was taken in 2015. And a big part of our efforts have been to tackle that challenge to go fully zero emission in scope 1. Otherwise, we have important goals on reducing indirect emissions, energy consumption, climate adaptation, and also carbon storage. Next, please. So this is what we get, the inventory from the national government for the scope 1 emissions, direct emissions in the city. As you can see, mobility is still 47% of overall emissions. Being reduced fast as we electrify on-road traffic. We have a large waste incineration facility which serves the district heating system. So actually a big part of the energy system is served by this facility. And we have a carbon capture and storage project to manage these emissions, hopefully before 2030. And then off-road machinery is a significant part of emissions. Roughly 14% is the number that we get from the inventory, and also a big reason why we have focused on then also electrification of construction works. Next, please. So at the heart of this effort is our procurement strategy. Back in 2017, the city government decided that the procurement that the city does should have as a point of departure that the city aims to become zero emission. So basically this permeates through all procurement that we do, and then also, of course, construction that we should go forward with our own procurement. And in 2019, the city decided at the highest level, actually the governing mayor and his closest team, that we should award environmental performance in all our construction projects. And as part of that, there was a kind of detailed prescription on how all the different agencies involved as a client to build different infrastructure and buildings, they should put 7% of the tender award criteria in the competition phase on, you know, the capacity of the companies to provide zero emission construction services. Also, transport of bulk materials and other transport is sort of detailed in this framework. And at the same time, in 2019, it was also stated very clearly and included in all contracts that by the 1st of January 2025, all works need to be zero emissions. So this was a very clear signal that if you want to do construction work for the city, then you need to have this capacity by 2025. So we sort of gave the market 5 years to do this transition. Thank you. Next. So these are the numbers that we get from our project portfolio last year in 2024. And it's been really impressive to see how fast the market has responded on this. Back in 2019, there was no capacity and all was, you know, done by diesel or biofuels, whilst, you know, 4 years later, 85% of works is performed by zero emission construction equipment. So that's a big success for us. Next slide, please. Yes. So this, of course, is a part of a long process. So it started out when the governing mayor, he challenged the market. Will you be able to build for us fossil-free using only biofuels, sustainable biofuels? And response from the markets was quite clear. This is no problem. So in 2017, the city adopted a standard minimum requirement for all works to be fossil-free, served then basically by either electricity or sustainable biofuels. But the market response was you know, also quite swift about, you know, we want to discuss how we can promote electrification, seeing that there are some sustainability issues related to the use of biofuels. So then, of course, we recognize city is a small city, and the city of Oslo is small in a global scale, and we certainly, you know, we engaged with the C40 cities. Really happy to see that we were able to create this clean construction platform, and I think, you know, this is really a clear part of our success, that we have been able to sort of scale up this demand and create, you know, through the C40 network, a bigger attention on this topic to the big companies serving these markets and actually producing the machinery that we need. So I've already talked about the standard requirements that we introduced in 2019. Next slide, please. And, you know, we did work also with the zoning permit requirements. I think this is really important that we show at, you know, our own capacity as a client and a builder through our procurement work that we can have this capacity to work fossil-free. And then we challenge the private real estate developers and the market through our regulation, the planning and building authority that we have as a city. So in 2025, we don't have the numbers for this year yet, but we hope to be very close to 100% electrified. And also we have a clear sort of ambition, and also the city government actually now has just concluded a public consultation on also having requirements for private real estate developers to go electric. Thank you. Next slide, please. So then I'll talk a bit about how we work also with materials, because of course this is more complicated than electrification, but still, you know, the most important aspect if you look at this from a sort of environmental impact perspective. So we build a lot, you know, different schools, all kinds of purpose buildings, nursing homes, libraries, and we have standardized also requirements for materials. Thank you. Next, please. So this is after a process involving also our building company, purpose building company, we arrived for the city government to decide that we should aim to reduce our emissions from materials in our own purpose buildings by at least 30% by 2030 compared to a dynamic reference. So this actually means we aim to halve emissions compared to 2020 by 2030. So it's a high ambition. Next, please. So then the agency responsible for doing these construction works, they typically plot all their projects. And you can see in this slide how every project has projected impact when it comes to material emissions. And the red dots are new construction, the green dots are renovation, and the dark green dots are, a combined renovation and new build. And you can see very clearly from this that, of course, when you do renovation projects, you are able to sort of produce square meters and volume with a very low impact. And we see also that it's very challenging for us going forward from 2025 to actually achieve those low emission projects that we aim for. Next, please. So this is a typical way we do calculations and analysis of a case example, this project. I won't go into the details, just, highlight that for this case, we put a requirement for a maximum of 239 kilograms CO2 per, square meter floor in each building. So this is a sort of way of approaching this and putting clear limits and giving this market signal that this also will going forward be stricter and stricter. Next, please. So, and right now we have been working for actually several years to produce a comprehensive set of standardized material requirements in all the portfolio. It's important to highlight that the ambition that we had set on halving emissions from materials by 2030 is a portfolio ambition. So it's for the construction company to find ways also managing how much new build, how much reconstruction, and high level of flexibility on how to achieve the goal. But with this next step, we are aiming for having maximum emission requirements for all the most important materials that goes into a construction project, both infrastructure and buildings. And typical then on asphalt, concrete, steel, we set specific quantified numbers for limits for example, concrete, so that we make sure that the concrete that we use in our own project are low carbon concrete, basically. And then on addition, as a supplement to these minimum requirements, we have also these tender award models that will, award the companies that are able to provide us with, even a higher ambition realized than the minimum requirements set. So this is a combination of minimum requirements and tender award criteria that would hopefully stimulate the market to innovate and be able to provide us with low carbon solutions, more and more ambitious and more strict going forward. So I think that was it from me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Philip, for presenting this really comprehensive vision and high ambition with very concrete targets, and also showing that this is a multi-year strategy and process to accomplish these results. But congratulations for the great work that you're leading, and thank you for sharing it with us today. It was very interesting. Maybe we can move to our next presenter now. We have with us Mervyn Jones, who is representing the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management from Netherlands, and has brought some examples on collaborative approaches to driving demand through sustainable and circular public procurement. Mervyn, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gina. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody. As Gina said, I work for the Rijkswaterstaat, which is part of the Ministry for Infrastructure for Water Management in the Netherlands. And I'm going to be giving a couple of Dutch examples, but I'm also going to be giving an example from Wales as well, work that was done with the Welsh Government, just to highlight the link between circular procurement, circular practices, and also the Buildings Breakthrough carbon, resilient and near zero carbon buildings initiative. The key message of my presentation and the examples I'm going to be showing is that procurement is a pivotal lever in reducing embodied carbon and operational emissions in buildings and the construction sector. It's optimizing the benefits from demand-led approaches requires collaboration if it's going to succeed. We can't do this alone. You know, the Dutch economy in itself is only just slightly bigger than the whole of the economy of London in the United Kingdom. And we've got a target within the Netherlands of being circular economy by 2050. We import something like about, I think in terms of goods and services, around 60 to 70% of our GDP from outside of the Netherlands. So if we're going to be circular in terms of our economic goals, if we're going to drive value chains to help us become circular, we have to work internationally on an international level. And collaboration is vital at all levels. So that international collaboration is required between governments. We need to collaborate at international scale with international partners and value chains. However, as Gina noted in the introduction, 50% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 haven't been built yet. And this happens at a local and a regional scale. So cities and municipalities have a really important role to play. And the benefits of the circular practices also tend to materialize more tangibly at the local and the regional level through local economy benefits, as well as knock-on social benefits. So it's really important that we recognize not just the role of procurement, but the role of scale in all of this. Next slide, please. So the first example I'm going to give is the metropolitan region of Amsterdam, who set a climate neutral target of being climate neutral within the whole of the metropolitan region. So that's the city of Amsterdam and local municipalities, around 30 different municipalities by 2050. And the MRA has implemented several circular procurement case studies now as part of its goal to be fully circular, as you can see on the slide. It has a strategy in place that is due for renewal, and it's got an implementation plan through to 2026. But the strategy focuses on 3 key value chains that are really strongly linked into carbon footprint. That's the built environment, consumer goods, and food and organic waste streams, as you can see. Next slide, please. This is an interesting one. There's a lot of information on this slide, so I won't go into it all. But within the programme, it's the metropolitan region of Amsterdam has identified circular procurement and commissioning as a key mechanism. And you'll see there under that first bullet point that it's developed a roadmap for circular procurement and commissioning. In effect, that's a toolkit that takes a municipality, that takes an organisation right through from the very start about thinking what levels of ambition it actually wants to achieve in terms of circularity, in terms of sustainability, right through the whole process of developing those ambitions, putting those ambitions into policy, following those policies through into procurement practice, whether that's strategic procurement or the transactional, the operational end. And there's a hot link in there that hopefully you'll get the slides, but you can click on that link and go to an English version of that roadmap. It's looked at 4 categories, again, as you can see on the slide, and just highlighting from a built environment. One of those categories is concrete and asphalt. So looking at the importance of infrastructure here when we're talking about the built environment. And in terms of practical examples, you can see again on the slide that it's talking about circular construction criteria, developing criteria, which it has done. Interestingly, just what was said in terms of the city of Oslo, this is about giving a weighting of at least 50% to circular and sustainable construction within tenders. A key focus also on materials reuse and tracking. And for example, in the district and I'm English, even though I work for the Dutch government and I find it difficult to pronounce Dutch, but the Bilkstraam neighbourhood, 80% of materials in public spaces have to be made from reused, recycled or bio-based sources. And that's, as a target, is a really stretching target, but they're well on the way to achieving that. In the final one there is a green timber deal for construction. So again, thinking about materials choices. Next slide, please. Other examples that Amsterdam has been using in terms of procurement is looking at the environmental costs of materials use. So within the procurement, within the tender process, Amsterdam is using environmental cost indicator as a way of managing the negative environmental impacts of extraction, production, transportation. So again, it's embedding these into its sustainability criteria within the actual tenders. In terms of circular buildings, it's looking to set an example by entering into framework agreements for construction, in this case of 30 new buildings, including school buildings, and the first 9 of those have been tendered since 2023. Interestingly, again, this comes back to collaboration. The City of Amsterdam is a massive in terms of the Dutch economy, but it's not big enough by itself, and it's got a grant of 400 million euros just this year to build another 32,000 social houses. Social housing is a key issue, and housing is a key issue in the Amsterdam region, as it is in many large urban conurbations. But again, that money and those 32,000 social houses will be built according to circular principles. Next slide, please. And finally, from Amsterdam, just a quick specific example. This was created back in 2017 by ABN AMRO, which is a large Dutch bank, as a learning hub for circularity. It's a pavilion, a learning hub, as I've just said, designed and constructed according to circular principles. And that follows through, as Andrew was saying, not just in terms of the design, but in terms of the construction practices, as Philippe was also saying, from the City of Oslo, also into the operation side of it. So thinking about materials components that have already been used, have already had a previous life, and specifying those reused components in the new building. One of the specific elements that I wanted to draw attention to in terms of circular design is related to components and jointing, very technical in terms of the specifications with the design, but it's there to enable disassembly at end of life. So things like developing reversible connections between buildings, superstructure elements, allowing access to those reversible connections between the structure and the building services. There's many examples where that particular element goes wrong, particularly when we're talking about refurb and maintenance further down the line. And then finally, developing and issuing a disassembly manual document for the building itself. Next slide, please. Now, moving on from the City of Amsterdam, I wanted to highlight it's not just large urban conurbations. This is a pretty small city, both in Dutch terms, but also in European and in global terms, the city of Apeldoorn in the Netherlands. And again, I wanted to highlight the importance when we're talking about resilient and low carbon construction, and it needs to consider the impacts of the supporting infrastructure as well as the buildings themselves. And I'm talking here about infrastructure such as drainage, groundworks, roads, etc., which can account for between 20 to 40% of the built environment carbon footprint. The influence of the public sector procurement is also highly significant within these infrastructure projects in a way that it sometimes isn't within the commissioning and the capitalisation and operation of buildings. So Apeldoorn used a regeneration opportunity within this residential neighbourhood to actually to pilot circular practices, focusing on, as you can see there, 3,000 square metres of pavement, sidewalks and green space along the residential domain district within the city. So it focused very much on material choices, specifically on asphalt in roads to promote longevity through repair and maintenance, looking at different repair options, self-healing asphalt, for example. looking at baked clay elements, which in other language are bricks, pavers, tiles, etc. You can see a rather uninspiring picture of pavers being used in a car parking situation. But again, it's these uninspiring elements within infrastructure and buildings that are often the elements that can have some really high impacts and also some great opportunities for more circular outcomes. And then finally, they looked at concrete products, and that included looking at the options for low carbon cement and recycled cement within certain applications. And the city also introduced the use of materials passports. And again, this is a mechanism for looking at the impact and looking at the constituency ingredients of materials and of components and elements all the way through their life, from production right into decommissioning, into reuse and recycling at end of life. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not expecting, and I'm not going to spend any time on this alone, but what I wanted to highlight was that the pilot that the City of Apeldoorn produced was part of a wider European project, an EU Horizon 2020 project called City Loops. And that project used the information from the pilot in Apeldoorn and 6 other small to medium European cities who were working on circular construction projects. And it used that information to develop this generic guidance, of which this is just a snapshot example of the overview of where procurement sits within construction process and what the opportunities are. So it's developed this generic guidance for construction projects across all stages from design to operation. And again, there's a hot link there that you can pick up that report from the City Loops project. Just a couple more slides now. So next slide, please. I'm now going to move from the Netherlands to Wales, just again to highlight the link between what councils, what local authorities, municipalities can do at a municipal level in terms of carbon reduction. Cardiff Council is the largest council in Wales, and bringing it back to carbon, the 2022 Circularity Gap report, it highlighted that 11% reduction in material consumption in the built environment could lead to about 11% reduction in carbon emissions. So anything we can do in terms of the built environment is a one-to-one benefit in terms of carbon emission reduction. Cardiff City Council have focused through their One Planet Carbon strategy on procurement, and specifically on procurement and decarbonising procurement. Evidence suggests that circular practices such as the reuse of building materials, for example, is going to be necessary to meet these emission reductions targets, and that's what informed their policy decision to focus on this. It's a very persuasive link between circularity and carbon, and they've picked up on it. So their socially responsible procurement strategy that they developed drives carbon reduction alongside wider social and environmental benefits and legal responsibilities. And they've recognised, Cardiff have recognised the role that it has in supporting other smaller councils within the southeast of Wales, and collectively creating a procurement, a platform called the Ardal Partnership, which recognises and embeds circular procurement principles into processes and practices. It creates a demand-led approach, which is what we're talking about under this building's breakthrough theme. And this demand-led approach is an approach to socially responsible procurement, which gives them a greater collective leverage over a very technical, a very conservative, and a very high impact supply chain. Last slide, please. And this is just a very, very, very quick example. Again, a lot of information on here, but I won't go through it all. But essentially what they've done, the first step Cardiff have done is analyse the carbon footprint of their procurement and identified high impact categories. And I've just highlighted in those bar charts the construction related categories. Construction, capital, maintenance and operation are the highest, alongside energy consumption and passenger transport services. And Scope 3 emissions in Cardiff account for 86% of their total carbon footprint. And procurement, which is wholly in Scope 3, accounts for 94% of those Scope 3 emissions. So if you work that back to the total carbon footprint, that's procurement accounts for 81% of Cardiff Council's total carbon footprint. And the biggest sectors in there, as you can see, are indeed construction and infrastructure related. So in line with UK government regulation, they now require contractors to have their own carbon reduction plans and targets. And on the previous slide, I did miss the fact that in terms of their own work, Cardiff Council and their partners through ARDL have created 3 frameworks around civil engineering, around professional services in construction, and around capital assets in buildings, where they're embedding these sustainable and circular procurement requirements into tenders, as you can see in terms of examples on the screen. So again, practical examples of how you can take very high level policies and start to implement them through procurement practice into real world case studies, real world general practice that we've just seen in terms of the Netherlands. So I'll finish there, Gina, and if any questions at the end or in the chat, happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mervyn. Thank you very much for bringing this set of different examples. Again, in the case of Amsterdam, showing us how clear targets can set action in motion, and introducing some concepts like the environmental cost indicator, the material hierarchy, and these collaborative frameworks. I invite participants to write your questions in the Q&A section. Please, if you have questions on any of these examples, which were the most significant levers of action, the challenges, any questions that you have, please add them in the Q&A section, so that this is a useful webinar for you, and we wisely use our experts and their experience also to support your own endeavors. So without any further ado, let's move into the next presenter. We're very pleased to have here Mr. Tyrone Yu. He's the Director of the Environment Department of the City of San Francisco in the US. And he's going to show us his municipal model for climate circularity and health. Welcome, Tyrone, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Gina. Hello from San Francisco. It's an honor to join our friends and partners from around the world. Like Oslo and Amsterdam, San Francisco is a small city by geography with a population of about 800,000. And we use our policy framework to operate as a test bed for our approaches that we hopefully can scale. We're a dense, very seismically active coastal city. We have the same problems many cities have with aging infrastructure, high construction costs, and really strong community expectations around affordability, health, safety, and justice. So for us, integrating climate into our public investment isn't optional. It's part of how we protect people in our neighborhoods and ecosystem. And procurement for us has been one of our most powerful tools in signaling and helping to move the market. Next slide. I think that we'll go to the next slide after this. In San Francisco, about 44% of our sector-based emissions comes from energy used within our buildings. And when you obviously add in the carbon embedded in the concrete and steel and materials that flow through our economy, the footprint grows even larger. We've already heard the statistics that Gina provided. So we look at our procurement decisions as making decisions now and embedding those standards in helping shape our climate trajectory for decades to come. We also learned that long-term commitments can be delivered when they're tied to procurement and governance. More than 15 years ago, San Francisco, for example, set a goal to achieve 100% renewable electricity citywide. We met that goal in 2023, 2 years ahead of schedule. Our municipal operations also run on 100% fossil-free hydroelectric power, and that foundation allows our building policies to focus more directly on decarbonization, circularity, and resilience. So today I want to show you how we use public procurement anchored in our municipal code to drive market demand for near zero circular and climate resilient buildings. Next slide. In San Francisco, none of this work is voluntary. I think you've heard that theme already from the previous presentations. In San Francisco, we embed our climate, circularity, and resilience goals directly into our environment code. And this means that every municipal project, every library, health clinic, fire station, community center is legally required to meet performance standards. We organize this work around 3 central pillars. Pillar 1 is around building performance standards. And so this begins at the design phase long before a contract is awarded. And as of our 2023 code amendments, every major project has to integrate whole building life cycle assessment to quantify embodied carbon. They have to use environmental product declarations for concrete, steel, and other key materials. We have electrification requirements that prohibit new fossil fuel systems from being installed. And we have high performance energy and water standards. And we do this in alignment with the US Green Building Council standards for LEED Gold or higher. And to ensure that these requirements survive design changes and value engineering, our code requires that product teams submit updated performance documentation at every major design milestone. So this turns the design phase into kind of a longer arc climate phase. And it sends a very clear signal, not just to the architects, but to the engineers, the suppliers, and the contractors. So low carbon performance isn't optional, it's the starting point. Our second pillar shapes the flow of materials through a project. San Francisco has a material reduction and recovery plan. We require deconstruction surveys and salvage strategies. That means circularity, again, is written into the procurement documents and construction contract and not treated as the afterthought. We also require design teams to incorporate space in their building design for things like recycling, composting, and refuse collection. So it's designed into the building itself. And that circularity becomes part of the building's physical infrastructure. And we go even one step further through our environmentally preferable purchasing ordinance. And so we maintain an approved alternatives list for the elimination of products with harmful chemicals. And so we look at the toxics exposure as well. So things like PFAS, certain flame retardants, and other substances that can threaten indoor air quality and public health. And together, these tools help shift our market towards reusables, recyclable, low toxicity materials. And they increase the transparency for our small and minority-owned businesses that are trying to enter this green building economy. So this isn't just about carbon, it's also about improving health and strengthening trust. Our last pillar is around resilience and nature-based design. And this broadens the definition of performance. For critical municipal facilities like shelters, health centers, emergency response hubs, our code requires design teams to size solar and battery storage so that the buildings can operate for at least 72 hours after an outage. This includes identifying and calculating and protecting priority electrical loads. We also integrate air quality, filtration, and ventilation requirements that prepare buildings to respond to wildfire smoke and even pandemics and other indoor air hazards. And then finally, we embed nature into our design requirements. And so bird safe design, native and habitat supporting landscaping, and stormwater infiltration are all part of our requirements because we know that resilience is ecological as well as it is structural. And these requirements together ensure that every public building contributes to a more adaptive, biodiverse, and healthy urban environment. Next slide. Embedding these standards in law is only half the story, though, and so we operationalize them, as I briefly mentioned earlier. We have cross-agency governance, and so we have a municipal green building task force that brings together our municipal real estate, landscape architects, engineers, and sustainability teams from all of our major departments into one coordinated body to help track compliance and align design standards. We have design to construct and enforcement requirements. So again, I mentioned earlier, we do monitor performance through the construction phase. And so at 30, 60, and 90% design, and again at construction, we ensure that materials, systems, and strategies stay aligned with the code. So we don't allow slippage in the projects. And finally, we consult with our suppliers to move the market. We want the market to know what our expectations are. And so we build transparency tools such as our approved toxics-free alternative lists. And this helps the small contractors navigate requirements, which can be really daunting and complicated. And so we try to send a consistent long-term demand signal for both low carbon materials and resilient design. And this is how we turn our policy into practice, and how this practice then, we believe, helps transform the market. Next slide. Even in this challenging market, we're already seeing progress in all of our new projects and rehabs. All electric municipal buildings are now standard across our portfolio. Suppliers are increasingly providing environmental product declarations because they already know that our products require them. So they're coming ahead of time. We're not having to educate them as much anymore. We have deconstruction and salvage requirements that are growing the secondary materials market. And because of that, we're starting to look at scaling local facilities. Low toxicity materials and PFAS-free products are becoming more available and cost competitive. And we've already seen the resilience codes start to deliver new solar storage systems for community critical buildings like some of our libraries that we're constructing now. And none of this is happening by accident, and it's happening because the procurement rules are very clear. The expectations are durable. We also have those quality control checks, and we create that consistent demand signal. Next slide. So as everyone starts thinking around their own frameworks under this track, I think we can offer kind of 6 lessons from San Francisco. You've heard from others: use performance-based standards, let the innovation drive solutions, don't try to dictate the technology because it's rapidly changing. Require your LCAs and EPDs to accelerate market transparency. Integrate reuse and deconstruction into procurement so that the circularity becomes contractual and not aspirational. Create alternative lists and make them transparently available, especially for safer low carbon materials. And this helps the market transition faster when suppliers and buyers or providers are seeing what's required ahead of time and seeing it in multiple places at the same time. Lastly, last 2, align building procurement with energy transitions. Clean energy and electricity multiplies the impact of low carbon design, and we tend to treat them separately, but we should think about them together. And lastly, build strong governance. Procurement only works when you have everyone at the table together, from the design, engineering, real estate, and sustainability sectors, and they're all moving together. And I think these simple approaches are adaptable and transferable at any scale, not just locally, but regionally and nationally as well. Next slide. And just to wrap up, I think our experience here in San Francisco is showing that when we embed transparently climate, circularity, health, and resilience directly into our procurement and policy, we do more than just reduce emissions. We do change the market, and we change what suppliers produce, which is key. And we're changing how buildings are imagined and designed and delivered. And with accelerators like the C40 cities and this conversation here, we can accelerate this, right? So we're all doing the same thing. That's where the acceleration can be amplified, and market providers really see strong market signals. And overall, we get to improve the lives of the people that rely on these buildings. So thank you for the opportunity to share our experience.
Thanks to you, Tyrone, for presenting your experience, showing us how public procurement can be a tool for signaling and helping to move the market, and also for presenting so nicely your lessons learned and bringing this point of governance and the very interesting task force that you have put together to coordinate and align across disciplines and administrative bodies. Now, we are going to move to our next presenter. We're going to have a presentation by our team at UNEP on the Global Framework for Action to Advance Sustainable and Circular Public Procurement on the sector. Jorge, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gina, and colleagues. Can you hear me, or
we can hear you
sound
well?
Coming out well?
Yeah.
Perfect. Really, it's such a pleasure. As I was thinking before I joined this panel, the more the merrier. How impressive and how strong it has been, the sustainable public procurement contribution to the solutions adopted and highlighted at COP30 in Belém. And actually, this conference that we're having today and this follow-up webinar does allows us to emphasize the critical importance of the gradual strengthening of the sustainable public procurement agenda in the context of the implementation of climate agreements. And I was very much inspired to hear the story of San Francisco that preceded me. Today, I have the chance and opportunity to introduce the progress achieved in the implementation of the Global Framework for Action, which is a significant milestone that we achieved in the last COP29, and that we have carried forward until COP30 already with concrete implementation, which I will share with you today. Our goal is to harness sustainable and circular public procurement to drive demand for near zero and resilient built environment. Let's move on to the next slide. Over almost 100 participants are connected today, and I am sure that you all agree on one key message. If we use well the power of the public purse, we can really achieve significant goals, not only because they are a key lever for climate and sustainable development, sustainable public procurement, it is a wonderful way of also promoting social outcomes, but also it is a way of creating public-private dialogue that helps innovate and bring solutions to the market. The scale of, and we do know, and this is a really great slide, I cannot go into detail, but that public procurement sometimes account up to or even more than a third of public spending. And one of the most important things that government spend in is infrastructure in buildings and in construction. 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 50% of the total material footprint of the buildings that will exist in 2050 would have been expected to double without consistent action by 2060. And this is why this, I would say, 30 by 30 or this double 30, it highlights the importance of procurement, but it also highlights the impact that the built environment has for a climate transition. Let's move on to our next slide. And as I already mentioned, and here we see it in the chain of interlocked actions and associated benefits that public procurement has as a key lever for climate and sustainable development. We have an opportunity to use procurement as a tool to achieve a number of goals and a number of outcomes. I have already mentioned this, and to maximize social, economic, and environmental returns. Let's move to the next slide in the interest of time. The foundation of the work that we have done and that I would like to update the participants today, it really goes back to the Paris Agreement and then subsequently reaffirmed by the Chaillot Declaration that was just adopted a few years ago in the context of the Global Forum for the Built Environment. It really specifies as the implementation of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction in its Article 6.4 to lead by example through ambitious procurement policies with particular attention to the built procurement. In this regard, we have been working with a number of partners that you see highlighted here, the government of Netherlands that has to be recognized, the government of Finland, the partners associated also with the United Kingdom, and a number of institutions and organizations that have been part of this journey. Thanks to this collective effort, we have been able to produce, I already mentioned more than a year ago, a first deliverable that was the Global Framework for Action. The Global Framework for Action, as its name states out, it's composed of two main assets. One is a set of 5 common principles, what we call the foundation of how to use public procurement to generate demand for sustainable buildings. And second, the associated actions, because principles without associated actions, they are just words without pathways for implementation. The associated actions map the roadmap that countries should take and national stakeholders and subnational stakeholders should take to wherever they find themselves to move towards the ladder of using procurement to meet their climate pollution goals. We have subsequently strengthened these two framework with a practical roadmap, a collaborative roadmap, and I believe this is in the next slide, a set of experiences that allows us to document the actions that are being taken and the journey that countries have taken in this regard. Let's move to the next slide. And for those of you that are interested, you can use this QR code to download the materials and access the resources that we have created. What kind of sets us apart, this global framework for action, it is these three key components that you see here. One, a very strong anchor on circular economy, a vision towards achieving circular economy and bringing in as the core of this transition, the use of life cycle approaches in the procurement process. The second, it is that we have understood that without implementation, capacity building, and bringing in and skilling, increasing the skills, particularly of procurement practitioners, no framework for action can be successful. And therefore, it has this very strong focus on implementation and creation of skills and capacities. And last but not least, it has strong component of alignment with other compatible frameworks associated to the built environment and to the climate processes, including those that are looking at specific materials and promoting greater use of reused and recycled materials. So it is a very much of a compatible framework, very much of a framework that is aligned with other international initiatives and ambitious agendas. Let's move to the next slide. What we have seen, and this is very much new information that I want to share with you, it is increased uptake at the national level by both developed and developing countries to lead the way and to own this agenda. And you see here in the slide, not only countries that have already agreed to endorse the framework for action formally and officially as part of their climate action processes, but the areas of expertise in which they are already collaborating and where they do see specific leadership. And I want to say that what you see here, it is just the work of a very small team and in a very few amounts of weeks and months to make this a concrete reality and a contribution that was announced in Belém. We are really proud to announce and to recognize leading engagements from Ghana, from Colombia, from Brazil, from Finland, Japan, France, Kenya, and Somalia, and more are on their way. All those thoughts reflect efforts on their way to bring more countries to endorse this framework for action and to help us increase not only in the impact, but also on the recopilation of initiatives and actions that we hope to communicate at the next climate conference to be taking place in Turkey. Let's move to the next slide. So this is very much new and innovative. I want to conclude also with looking ahead and how do we move from endorsement to implementation. A core component I already mentioned, it is the use of technical tools and technical support and building on existing networks. The specific partnerships that I want to recognize, it is here a work that increasingly is being done with the support of multilateral regional financial institutions such as the African Development Bank, working with a specific, I would say, knowledge partners such as IISD, great leading actors on the sustainable public procurement agenda, working with consumer protection and eco-label networks through the EcoAdvance project that is helping us really connect and scale up initiatives. And my colleague Gina can speak more of this in the question and answer section if there is more. But just to say that what we are doing now, focusing on today, we want to call for more partners that want to help us move from endorsement to implementation. If you have something to contribute or your organization has something to contribute or you're active in a specific network, please let us know. We want to work with you. Let's move to the next slide. What does it mean endorsing and joining this movement for action? Well, it first entails the endorsement of the 5 common principles, and these principles that are here very much echo what our colleague Jude Tyrone, I see your name here, maybe I didn't get it correctly, but what you were mentioning in this putting life cycle the core is having the right governance, use information tools, ensure that you have the technical support, capacity building, and you really build the right momentum to strengthen collaboration across governments and markets. And sort of these 5 principles are very generic. They're very broad, but what we have seen as we move into implementation is that they can really help us, create traction and increase action. I don't know, Gina, if I can say that this framework for action, is it open to subnational authorities to join? Now we have a very strong focus on national authorities, but subnational governments, I believe, also have a role to play and should also be in turn invited to endorse these 5 common principles. They're really common, and as I say, they work for developed countries such as Japan, but also can work for developing countries, because that's our vision, to take countries wherever they are. We all share the same challenges. So let's now move to the next element. So it entails endorsing the 5 common principles, identifying those associated actions, and then acting upon them. I think we got the slide, and I'm very sorry for that, but there is a very nice web page that has been created to really show what has been done and what is being done in terms of actions by all the partners that have been implementing this framework. And please connect, and we should be putting the link for the national experiences webpage that we have developed, and where the partners, the work that has been done, it's really reflected. So I want to appreciate the time and recognize the excellent work that's being done by our colleague Gina Torregrosa, who leads this wonderful work with Silvana, who is also connected and facilitating this session today, and to say that we're looking forward to engage even more partners, to get more countries, and wherever you are, please help us pass the word on. We need more countries between now and the next COP, and really finding those partners that will help us take our action to the next level. Thank you, and back to you, Gina.
Thank you very much for presenting our work and for your kind words. Silvana, if we move into the next slide, I think we have a few minutes for Q&A session, and we have a couple of questions both in the chat and the Q&A section. Andrew, just to begin, there was an interest in joining C40. I saw that you replied with your contact details. Maybe you want to put them as well in the chat so that everyone finds them easily. If you're interested in learning more about C40 work, don't hesitate to contact Andrew. So on the concrete questions that we have, first I'll take the one that's on the chat. The person is asking if you are also measuring or have a sense of what this person calls the secondary but socioeconomic benefits of the actions that you're implementing. We're very much focused on climate and the environmental gains, but we know that that doesn't operate in isolation, and that probably you are thinking about it in a more holistic way. So if any of you have an experience to illustrate also the socioeconomic benefits of the activities that you've embarked on. Any of the panelists? No? Go ahead, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Of course, there's a number of different benefits, and I think, from our own work with zero emission construction, electrifying heavy duty works, it has a potential significant impact, especially in cityscape where there's a lot of people. You're in dense urban areas, and just the nuisance from heavy duty construction equipment with exhaust and air pollution, and also with the noise that is significantly reduced or removed when you go to electric. So that's a certain sort of benefit from that electrification effort that we are now experiencing actually in Oslo, both on-road and off-road applications. So of course it's difficult to quantify these effects and have a sort of more high resolution analysis of the health benefits, but obviously exhaust and air quality is an issue across most cities, I believe, and all these different measures that you can do to reduce emissions and noise is to the benefit of the people, certainly. Thank you.
Thanks. Tyrone, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that Philip said, that it's difficult to quantify some of the socioeconomic benefits. I tend to think of things in terms of time frames, right? We tend to think of the short-term time frame versus the long-term time frame, and we know that, like Philip mentioned, when you're building an all-electric building, the indoor air quality is going to be better because you're not burning, a fossil fuel potentially inside your building. And so you don't need the exact science or numbers to know that it's going to provide a benefit long-term for the residents or people that are going to be working or living there. I think one thing that we try to do with all of our policies on the front end, which I also encourage, is doing kind of the socioeconomic and equity analysis up front, like a lot of our cities do, right? So before we do these policies, do your due diligence also, because that's how you bring people together, right? When oftentimes these policies are seen as, the stick coming in and mandating things. But when you can try to bring folks together early on in the process and the development of the policy, then you can find kind of the common ground and make sure you're not causing unintended consequences and socioeconomic consequences on particular groups or individuals.
Thank you. Mervyn, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, just very quickly, Gina. 2 points there. At the highest level, if you think about specifying circular materials, one of the biggest barriers to the circularity of materials are the toxic materials that are contained in components and products. So by specifying more circular materials, and reducing the toxicity and the long-term impacts of those materials through better materials choice at the beginning of the project, you're having an indirect, well, you're not having an indirect, you will further upstream into extraction of virgin materials, for example, in some highly questionable areas, but also in terms of production environments. Tyrone mentioned PFAS, plastics and brominated flame retardants in plastics. If you're actively not specifying those, and you're actively specifying greener materials, then you are contributing to safer environments in terms of the production. The other social stroke economic benefit is that by reusing, refurbishing, repairing, and remanufacturing existing components, products and materials, you're also creating secondary markets for those materials. So again, you're displacing the impacts of virgin material extraction, but you're also creating the opportunity for jobs. And very often those jobs are local jobs, because refurb, repair and less remanufacture, but refurb and repair tends to actually occur at a local level rather than at an international level. And by creating jobs, you're creating opportunities for an employment. And studies have shown, health studies have shown, that an employed person is typically healthier than an unemployed person. So by creating secondary markets, creating more job opportunities at a local level, you are creating local health benefits, in addition to everything that both Philip and Tyrone have just said.
Thank you, Mervyn. I believe we have a few minutes to take some questions also from the Q&A section. There's a couple of them. One is on how are you balancing the added cost or the perceived cost of circular and low carbon materials with budget constraints, especially in periods now that we have a fiscal pressure, and how cities were able to justify the extra spending from a financial perspective. Philip, please go ahead. You were very quick. I love it.
Yeah, I'm quick there because we've just concluded quite a significant work on trying to make this puzzle, understanding better the cost, risk and cost implications. And what we have, at least in the Nordic markets now, is you can do significant reductions on the material footprint without any additional cost. We estimate that roughly 20% of material impact you can remove without significant additional cost. And also going quite aggressively, with, for example, halving the embodied emissions we estimate it's roughly, you know, somewhere between 0.3 and 0.6% of the typical sort of construction budget. So it's really, you know, put into perspective with what is actually the cost of producing new buildings. The additional cost when, you know, you put into that construction process these strict material requirements, that they're still manageable, you know, from a policy standpoint, I believe, and we think there's a lot you can do without actually risking any additional cost at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Andrew, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can maybe add a few thoughts. And yeah, I think you know, a lot of the strategies that we promote, some of them are based around materials and the procurement of materials, but also, you know, if you look at using less material, right, there's sometimes overuse, and so actually just taking material out, that's a cost saving. You know, that's something that's free. Using spaces more efficiently, right, that is saving embodied carbon by reducing the demand for new buildings. So you're optimizing your assets in situ and providing you know, purposeful spaces for citizens that way. And yeah, I think as alluded to by Mervyn just a moment ago, the markets for these materials are local, and so you know, indigenous bio-based materials and solutions come from the local environment, come from the local industries, and so it's kind of, you know, keeping those flows within the local city, within the local municipality. And yeah, and if a low carbon building with bio-based materials is healthier, you know, has less toxins in it, is more resilient to the environment, then you know, if there is a cost premium to that, then you're getting something for that, as compared to business as usual, you know, overuse of cement and asphalt and these other you know, materials that have a high embodied carbon content, where, you know, they exacerbate those climate risks for citizens. But yeah, I'll pause there. Thanks, Gina.
Thank you. Mervyn?
Yeah, agree with what's just been said. From a procurement perspective, it's about asking intelligent questions as a client and setting a transparent budget. What is available within the budget? So setting your circular or your sustainable ambitions realistically within the available budget. As Andrew's just said, you can do an awful lot within the available budget, and you can often find cost savings, particularly in terms of, as Andrew said, in construction, you know, is instead of over specifying, looking at waste within the construction supply chain. You know, there's studies that were done in the UK, albeit 10, 15 years ago, that showed that waste within the construction supply chain could be anywhere from 5 to 15%. You know, if you can take that waste out of the supply chain in a capital project, then that money is available to be either used for more sustainable innovations, or it can be used by going straight to the bottom line in terms of cost savings. So declare your budgets, declare what is available, and then find the ambitions and the solutions within that available budget is the intelligent question to ask.
Thank you, Mervyn. Tyrone, please.
Yeah, and just adding on to what my colleague said, I think we've seen kind of market scaling and the transformation of the market in terms of pricing scale very rapidly based on the demand. So just taking low carbon concrete as the simple example, you know, the price parity now with just concrete in general is basically, we're at parity, and that's driven just by city demand, and that's influenced kind of statewide demand. And now California as a whole can then work with other states, can like influence that and scale this market even bigger. So it really does have an effect when policies and procurement are in alignment. And I want to pick up on one point that Andrew mentioned, just around the innovation. When we set these policies and procurements, like, we don't have every single gap filled and every single barrier removed, right? Some of it is signaling that we have these challenges, and it forces the market to have to adapt and innovate new solutions to have to account for what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll use one example where, we've known that even with the furniture and the reuse market, that really brings down costs. It's costs that we don't tend to calculate in our overall project design. But when my department moved from one office to another, we were able to reuse all the materials and also the furniture in that move. So 95% of everything that was used in that move, we were able to just capitalize on existing furniture. And by doing that, we purchased the furniture for $1, right? So my entire office furniture was purchased for $1. We inventoried everything that we had previously and brought everything over to the best of our ability. And then the tax write-off then came for the furniture, like the previous tenant, right? So they were able to take advantage of the tax credit of giving this furniture to the government. And so there was this circular economy there where everyone benefited from this system just through intentionality. And we've created this virtual warehouse tool here in San Francisco that has now scaled outside, where we're trying to do this and replicate this on a larger scale and creating these opportunities just within facility footprints. And now this tool is being used by Google and other kind of tech companies here across their facilities all around the world. So when we set these policies, set these procurement goals, it drives innovation. When you drive that innovation, then you get the scaling, and then everyone kind of comes to the table. And there is so much opportunity here that is untapped.
Thank you so much to all panelists for your comprehensive and illustrative responses. We have one more question, but I believe that we need to move into our final remarks. I'll just read it, and maybe you can respond in the chat if you have a response to this question while we proceed with final remarks. The question is, how can we ensure within the context of circular public procurement that products made from recycled materials perform just as well as those manufactured using traditional methods? And then they have a follow-up question, what regulations are in place? And they mention particularly Amsterdam, but if any of you have a response and you can type a quick answer in the chat, that would be much appreciated. On my side, I had a question, but maybe this is just a follow-up workshop and conversation on how we operate this interface between national level ambition and commitments like the ones that we're leading and the actions that you're leading at city and municipality level. So maybe this is something that we can continue discussing, and I would be grateful to the panelists if you are interested in this dialogue. We can take it forward. Emma, I want to introduce you. We have Emma Lapelain from Fingroup Consultants representing the Ministry of Environment of Finland for some closing remarks. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you very much, Sheena. Colleagues, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share these closing remarks on behalf of the Ministry of the Environment of Finland. Finland is one of the forerunners in Europe in sustainable buildings and construction, together with our partner countries such as other Nordic countries. And in this role, we are very pleased to be able to set the ground for global policy development for circular and sustainable buildings and construction. And an example of this is Finland's new Construction Act that took effect in January this year. And it places a ceiling on emissions from new construction, setting a limit for the carbon footprint of buildings' life cycle. And through this new Construction Act, buildings are considered as material banks through a national-wide digitalized reporting system that supports the reuse and recycling of building materials and also the procurement. And we believe in Finland that procurement is a powerful mechanism for changing the pathways of the buildings and construction sector. And in Finland, circular procurement is not yet systematic, but it has been applied in different sectors, including construction. And reused and recycled building materials are already utilized in infrastructure and construction in Finland, like also in other European countries. And we are convinced that regulation is the key for ensuring that circular economy can be implemented at scale. And while in Europe and in many countries in the global north, there is regulation in place that supports circularity in the built environment, this is not always the case in the global south countries. And in the absence of regulations that would guide circularity, guidance and criteria for procurement become especially important. But defining exact criteria for circular economies is actually more complex than, for example, defining criteria for carbon footprint or energy use. However, it is very important to define a set of basic criteria for circularity that can be used to set requirements for procurement, and that can be also tailored to different contexts and to different types of projects. And equally important is to build the capacity of local and national authorities, city officials and professionals in the basic concepts of circularity in the built environment, so that utilizing these concepts and principles in procurement processes becomes familiar. And Finland has been a long-term advocate and supporter of sustainable and circular built environment through the UNEP-hosted One Planet network, as well as the global ABC. And our consistent work for over 10 years, together with partners, has paved the way for circular practices in the built environment all around the world. And currently Finland leads the Circular Built Environment group of the Global ABC Materials Hub, which is also co-hosted by the One Planet Network. And the recent main outputs of this group, prepared together with the United Kingdom, include the recommendations on the circular economy and life cycle impacts of construction, the so-called 10 whole life cycle recommendations for the buildings breakthrough. And Finland actively contributes to the international initiatives and networks related to sustainable, resilient and circular construction, including the International Council for Buildings and Construction and the Buildings Breakthrough. And we are also actively involved in the international efforts for circular public procurement, including UNEP's Global Framework for Action, harnessing sustainable and circular public procurement to drive demand for near zero and resilient built environment, which was presented by Jorge earlier in this webinar. And Finland has recently endorsed the Global Framework for Action as one of the first countries in the world, as was mentioned earlier in this webinar. And through endorsing the Global Framework for Action, Finland is proud to champion international collaboration, innovation and market transformation related to the buildings and construction sector and its procurement processes. And we very much encourage other countries also to endorse the Global Framework for Action and to set a global example for circular, sustainable and resilient public procurement practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. And with these remarks, we conclude our webinar. Thank you very much to all the panelists for your presence today, but also for your leaderships and your effort. It has been really inspiring to listen to your experience. And also thank you for participants for joining us today. We hope that this was an interesting session for you. Next year, we will continue advancing this topic in collaboration with the great partners that we have, and as Jorge mentioned, very much focused on capacity building for public procurement officers on this topic. So if this is something that you want to engage on or collaborate, the invitation is open. I hope that you have a really good rest of your day or evening, depending on where you're located. And thank you once again for joining us.